Ladies and gentlemen, it is a show on Tuesday. And I'm your host, Tim TK, joined by special guest, Curtis Fujita.
Yes.
Hello,
It's
hello.
funny. I see everyone down here, but on below me, but right here on Curtis, this is a big remove bar. So tempting. Not that I would, it's like the big red button. Remove Curtis.
Exactly. Do not press button.
Yeah. If I get out of line.
Yep. And I am joined,
Click it
as
off here,
always,
knocking out my door. I know you're in there.
Recently graduated with his PhD, Dr. Q.
Yes. Dr. Q is in the house, ready to cure you of whatever ails you with a little bit of, tonight we're going to be having a little bit of nerd talk to kind of ease you through the end of your day or the beginning of your day, depending on when you watch this. So just sit back and listen to our soothing voices.
This is true. We are on VOD and podcast, so you can watch/listen at any point in time. I'm trying to also get our Twitch chat pulled up here so I can see what all the lovelies will be harassing us with today. There you go. And you can listen to us in the middle of the night when you're. Oh, thank you, Ryan. I am excited to get into it. I was saying, yeah, if you want to throw us on at middle of the night while your partner is sleeping and bug them to no end, we're there for it. Yes. And I'm also joined by recurring prodigal child, Aaron.
Yes. I'm here, my children.
Yes.
You may relax.
It's the father who goes out for milk but keeps on coming back.
Yep.
That's an interesting.
You know how many families I cheat on you with? I have my family on Wednesday, my family on this night.
I don't know, man. With those glasses, you look like you just like you're one dim jacket away from like a cult.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, we're going to be talking about comics as the crossroads of the different, nerd cultures. Comics are just about everywhere, and everywhere is just about in comics. So
remember, the first one's free.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Once you get like your first hit at a Marvel movie, then it's going to come back to the comic shop and realize you got to pay for your second and third hit.
That's right.
Yep. But we'll also be talking about our Marvel Comics and CB effects. Exactly. We're going to be starting off with our regular icebreaker, which is what we've been reading, watching, playing, and or listening to this week. Whatever kind of media we've ingested, because it'll probably tie into our discussion at a later point. So let's work opposite way we introduced. Let's go with, I believe as Aaron was last. Let's go with Aaron.
What have I been doing?
Yeah.
Nothing. I just lay in my bed and stare at the ceiling.
Perfect.
I don't know. It's funny. You asked that question. I think last week I was been watching the Olympics for the last 2 weeks. So I usually don't watch any sports except the Olympics. I like those, so I watch those.
Sure.
You must be the only one because the numbers came out on that and it was terrible.
It was?
As far as the amount of people watching it.
Oh, it was fun. I had a fun time.
Yeah, because everyone realized why watch the Olympics when you can, watch stuff on Disney Plus.
Disney Plus? What's to watch on Disney Plus?
And Supergirl Volume 1 by Paul. Nice. Aaron also knows a lot about manga.
I know a little bit, a smidge. I've been getting my butt handed to me over and over again in the second Neo game. So I've been trying, and I just keep coming back for more. I just, no matter how many times the snake lady with the big boobs destroys me. Oh God, she has a move that she wraps around and like bites you. And anyway, yeah, frustration. It's just what else have I been watching? Started watching WandaVision. Finished up a comic series called Sithra. I think I told you about that by Brian. What was the guy's name again? Jason Brubaker, which I've heard before. It actually ended kind of weird.
We think it. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Other than that, I don't know. Not a lot of too many nerds starting to draw stuff on the obsoletes. because I finished my comic Galleons is finished, so I'm waiting just to
Awesome.
get money to print
Author?
that. Yeah, the whole thing's done.
Congratulations.
That's
That was a
super.
long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah.
So now I'm
That's-
trying to figure out what to do with this big mammoth stack of books. I'm
And
not
that-
really sure. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's why Aaron's been staring at the ceiling. It's just the existential dread. Now he's finished Godlings.
Now I got to figure out how to get it out in the world or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'd have like 2 more posts on the webtoons, and then it's all so.
yeah, that's a good run.
Yeah. So now it's working on Silverline stuff. Like I know some stupid comic company I've heard of.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's the extent. Oh, I did get to play that. What was it? Cyber 2077.
Yes.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
They finally fixed. I never played it when it originally came out because it was so broken. I was like, nah, I'm not gonna worry about it. But I was
Yeah.
at a friend's house. He downloaded the demo and it seems to be running okay.
Mhm.
That game's intense.
It's
Holy
good.
crap, the amount of stuff in that game is kind of
Yeah.
overwhelming.
That was like one of the few games that I actually like put in time to beat last year because I play long form grinders like Destiny or
Yeah.
whatever, but that was one of the games I actually put in time to beat. Given that I have a very very well endowed gaming PC, so it ran fine for me on launch.
Did you encounter a lot of the bugs or stuff that unlocked?
Not too many. There was a couple weird moments where either there's a UI break or something, but like a quick save and reload fixed it, and like running on an SSD, you don't even notice those.
Yeah. I think I went into a room in one of the games. For a split second, I thought I saw one of the NPCs do a T-pose, and then it wasn't. So it was trying, but it was pretty because I heard it was just like almost unplayable. So
For
I
a
just
PlayStation,
waited.
it definitely
Consoles,
was.
yeah.
Yeah.
PlayStation.
I don't know if of course, if you're going to play it on PlayStation, but I know one of my former professors, Tom Lucas, got it on PlayStation, and it was atrocious for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The new one for the PlayStation 5 is so far we played 5 hours. I know, and it's only $25 now.
Yeah.
It's on sale, so that's why I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. But not after I get my hand handed to me over and over by Neo. That's my bane of existence. So I don't know why I do that to myself.
That's where it goes. All right, Mr. Quinn, what have you been ingesting?
Nothing. Well, let's see. I've been keeping up on what is it? The spinoff from Yellowstone, 18.
How is
Whatever
that?
it is.
Do you?
I think it's more written for women, and when I say women, I mean like younger women. I like the Western part of it because I do like good Westerns.
Yeah.
And I just kind of sit around wait for that. The Western stuff. I love Sam Elliott. I think he's just awesome. I've always had a lot of respect for Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. I've always liked them. So I'm not a super big fan of the music, or I haven't been all the time. Kind of how you kind of like some of their stuff and then you don't like some of their stuff. That's kind of been me with them, but they can act. They've been in some really good movies, and I've seen some really good movies that they've played in. So I do like to watch when they're acting. But anyway, aside from that, I have really just been knocking out a lot of commissions, and it's been spending a lot of time with family, and kind of going through a little bit of since I finished Trump's, I've kind of been keeping myself busy. But when I don't have anything to do, I'm like, it's weird. It's just really weird that I have time. And because when you're working on a book, that's why I can't imagine how it must be for you, Aaron, finishing your book, man. It's just like really, it's like I should be doing something. I should be like doing something, because you have to clear so much of your schedule because, sequential art, I don't care what portion of it you're in. It's very labor intensive.
Yeah, I doubt so. I've been having the past few days. I've been kind of wandering around, going like, "Why? I should work on obsoletes. I could do that." maybe I should take a break and play games, and maybe I'm kind of burned out. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. I kind of look at it. I'm like, well, now that I birthed this thing into the world, now what do I do with it? Because if I do, I want to look it into one book, but I can't imagine the one book won't cost any less than $50. And I don't know how I'm going to sell it at that. So I have to try to figure out some way to either knock the price down or do something.
Well, I visited the San Angelo Comic-Con this weekend.
How was that?
Well, I sat up at it the last time they had it, but it really wasn't that great.
Oh, that's too bad.
But when I went this weekend, it was, man, that place was, I mean, it was filled to the brim. It was hard to even talk to any of the vendors or anybody because, I mean, they were just making sales. Like, I mean, there was traffic all through there. And what it is, I found out, was that the previous con owner kind of, I don't know, for the last few years when he's ran it, he runs like 2 others at different times. He's just been doing it for a while, and he was just not really putting forth a lot of effort in, you know, marketing it and all that kind of stuff. And he sold it to this guy that has it now. And this guy was amazing. He is really the one who's responsible for really making it something again. So next year, I think I'll be actually setting up again over there. So It was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. Other than that, though, I've just been doing commissions, and as soon as I get something, like I did a cover this week, and as soon as I got it, I had it turned out the same day.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. And that's penciled, ink, colored. And what it was something that I was already thinking of. And then like this cover came across, and I was like, this would be perfect, you know, perfect pose. Because I had nothing to do with the image that I had in my head. I was just thinking of a pinup, you know.
Yeah. He's all like, these methamphetamines.
Well, it was
work
that
great.
and not having anything else on my list. You know, usually I have like, you know, 3 things going at the same time, but heck, the last couple, you know, weeks has kind of been a little, you know, I don't want to say that too much because, you know,
Roland might send you something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roland's listening. Quentin's free.
Yeah. So that's it. That's pretty much it. That's me.
Very cool. Curtis, what have you been ingesting or up to this past week?
Yeah. Well, I've been plugging away at my Shadow Ghost comics, so that's been fun, you know. Yeah, you know, a couple of things. Music wise, I really got into a couple different artists that I never even heard of, but this group called Doomtree out of Minnesota.
Okay.
And they're a hip hop group, and just it was like probably the best hip hop and the best music I've heard in almost 20 years. Like it was that good. I was like, oh my gosh, they still make good music.
How old are you, Curtis?
Huh? 22, you know, and I was
you look 22.
You look at done it.
No, but it's really, really good. These guys out of Minnesota, and one of the artists in that group, her name is Dessa, and she sings and raps phenomenal.
Oh,
yeah. So I just was so impressed. It was just so nice to hear like really well put together music, you know. So big shout out to that group. So that's what I was listening to. And then TV, I stopped watching it for a while, but I kind of started getting back into it. This series called Gomorrah on HBO Max, which is it's like
Godzilla's Gomorrah.
No, it's like the Camorra, like the Italian mafia in Naples.
Okay.
So it's a really interesting show because it's all shot in Naples. So you have like beautiful architecture and like the crazy like Italian, you know, street fashion and stuff like that, but like mafia stuff. So it's pretty good series. I was watching that, and for video games, I've been playing this game called Sifu that came out on PlayStation.
How is that? Because I kept reading reviews on it. Is it good?
It's okay. I mean, it's more like an arcade game because the idea behind it is that you replay the same levels to get better, so you can progress further than you're actually trying to get through the game. You know.
Yeah.
So it's a very different mentality. But it's not bad. It's a little repetitive, but as somebody who, of course, who does kung fu, and it's cool. The style that's done in it is called Bak Mei, which means white eyebrow. So if you've seen the Kill Bill movies, They
Yeah.
have a character named Paime. That's the Mandarin pronunciation. That was a real life historical figure. That was essentially like Darth Vader. Basically, he's the one that betrayed the Shaolin monks and led the massacre of the Shaolin temple and betrayed them. He was the Judas in that scenario. And so
Wow.
it's his style of kung fu. And so yeah, so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool game.
It almost sounds like a roguelite, except
Well,
it doesn't mix up the levels.
That's what I heard is that it's a roguelite where the main enemy is old age.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. Each time you die, you come back, and I don't know exactly understand the math, but you come back a little bit older. So you only have so many times, and by the end, you're like in your 70s, and then like you can't get past 80. So you have like that's your last time to go back and do it. It's kind of an odd scenario, but it's
That
What
reminds
age
me of
did
Dark Souls 2 with the effigies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
and
yes.
the life bar going down every time until you
Mhm.
took an effigy. Yeah.
What was the
Mm.
what age do you generally start at? In your
you
20s?
start at 20, like 20 or so,
It'd
and
be
then
funny if you started like 10. Some little kid in
10.
there.
Maybe there's a cheat code.
The cheat
You
code.
could be
A little,
you could be an infant.
everybody's rolling on the ground holding their shins.
Yeah.
That kid, he's so fast.
Yeah.
The other game that I've gotten really deep into, and I never thought I would get in this game, is Dead by Daylight. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah.
I've seen that
Oh.
game
Oh my
played.
gosh,
That's
it
big on
is-
Twitch right now.
It is so fun. I mean, it's like if you were playing hide and seek with your friends online, but one of them's a murderer. Is basically what it boils down to. But it is so fun, and you get your friends to scream and freak out. That's I can't recommend that enough.
If you have PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
If you get a chance, the Predator game's the same concept.
Yeah.
Except you're like
Yeah.
4 people, and the Predator one's fun because you can jump out of trees and surprise them. Same concept. It's sort of horror, but you can actually defeat the Predator. I don't think in Dead by Daylight you can actually defeat the killer. I think you have
No,
to
you
escape.
just have
Gotta
to
escape.
escape.
Yeah.
That's the.
But
that's
they
the
always,
thing.
I get always getting my butt. And I had this guy, one of our friends, like, I never played this before. He just started just schooling us. And I'm like, yeah, right. You haven't played this before. I'm like, what are you, born a predator? He's all sneaking up and like, I'm like, did anybody see where Derek went? He just stabbed me in the neck, yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you like that type of game, that might be one to check out.
Yeah,
Same concept. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, asymmetrical, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those games are fun. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been keeping myself busy with. So,
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
yeah. How about you, Tim? What have you been up to?
I have not had a chance to read much of yet this week, but this just came in the mail, volume 4 of X-Force, so I'll be reading that this week.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, the cover art has always been really good this go on, but if it's also I mentioned this earlier on an earlier episode, but it's weird in that it's the first time that I've had a super team where my favorite characters are not your core, not the core carryovers from the mainline team. It's not Quinn or Wolverine. I'm super into Forge and I'm super into Black Tom Cassidy. Like those characters right now are really great.
That's good. That means they're doing something right with the writing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
They made Forge cool.
They made Forge real cool.
That's cool. Because I always thought there was abilities to make him cool, but they always tossed him there. I thought he was kind of a cool concept. I mean, I remember in Claremont.
Yeah, but he popped off like in like the late 90s where like Hacker Man was the favorite stereotype. So like, what if we had a mutant who was super techy?
Yeah.
But now he's kind of hitting that sweet spot of where a lot of speaking of the intersection of cultures, I'll get into the crossover between comics culture and gym culture because that is a very real thing right now, especially in the gyms I go to. But he's at that sweet spot where he is a super techie nerd who can absolutely out squat you. He's a nerd about fitness and like the science behind like anabolism and like you're achieving like and anabolic metabolism and all that. So
Forge.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
So
Okay.
So they get a lot to like part of Forge understand technology is understanding biotechnology and the fact that humans operate like a machine and knowing like how to trigger inputs. And stuff,
I didn't know that about Forge.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
that's a more recent addition because they wanted to give him something that makes him more than just being fun hacker man. They're actually he's
He's always kind of been in like a tertiary character.
Yeah.
I have bypassed buying his figure so many times.
Yeah.
And I even saw one this weekend for $20 and I should have
Mhm.
picked it up, but I was like, man, my X-Men shelf is
It
full of all the ones that I liked
Mm-hmm.
growing
Well,
up.
the funny thing is his power is supposed to be he can invent anything, right?
He's that technopath, so he understands how all machinery works together natively. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was just like, he should be like a billionaire or something by now. You think with this?
That's kind of what they get into, is the fact that he's so out there that no one wants to buy his stuff because it's like, if it isn't built for killing someone, it's built for improving like some random like training thing for like a muscle group that you don't know you need.
Okay,
to
so
train.
it's not really sellable to a
So yeah,
mass.
everyone's like, so that's like the whole thing is going through. Like everything that he does is so niche that no one wants it.
Okay.
But honestly, like this and I forgot the other name of the X Corp, which is another one's going on, which is about the business side of Krakow. It makes me want a new X Club series with Forge, Dr. Nemesis, and Madison Jeffries. I think that'd be a really fun team.
Cool.
Yeah. Playing wise, well, chat and Roland, you're all very lucky that I'm here tonight because the new.
Oh, you bleeped out.
Oh, so everyone's very lucky tonight because I'm here tonight because the new Destiny expansion came out today. So
That's what I kind of figured.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
yeah, so as soon as we end this tonight, I am going to be streaming that on my personal Twitch.
Nice.
But this weekend I've been playing a lot of Total War Warhammer 3, which is on Game Pass right now. So I'm playing a lot of that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's been my go-to for the past couple of days. But
Are
other
you
than that,
guys going to get in that Horizon Zero Dawn, that new one that came out?
Oh yeah, Forbidden West, right?
for us, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't gotten yet. I heard it's good though. I've heard it's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
I'd be kind of curious. I tend to I like open world games sometimes that, oh my god, there are time sinks.
Mm-hmm.
Even like that, I looked up because I look up does you could how long to beat a game. Even Neo's like over 100 hours for everything. I'm like, I don't have 100 hours.
Yeah, I just go off the like the main storyline, like that completion time, because there's no way I'm going for all the collectibles and
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Assassin's Creed games are like that. It's just like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, what's this thing
Yep.
end?
It doesn't ever end. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think even like because like Valhalla had an insanely large map, didn't it? And this like, I'm like 15 towers in, and I still have to see half the map.
Oh, geez. But the thing is, the game piece is not repetitive, right? But
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like the game that I like, the Yakuza series is really
Oh
fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
At first I
think
thought
play
it was,
those.
at first I thought it was going to be GTA, but with Japanese mafia, and it's totally not. In fact, the character is very likable and like actually a decent guy. But,
Yeah.
But those games are fun because there's so many side quests and stuff like that. And,
Mhm.
and once you get in a mode where you're just going to give into like every little side quest, it's a very fun game. But if you try and attack it like I have to get through the story, it's not quite the same thing. But
Yeah.
Some
And
games kind of
And Nakusu games also don't they feature like a lot of judo?
yeah, they have a lot of judo, boxing, a lot of the action
Yeah.
is really fun. Really
Yeah,
fun.
because I remember I saw some like the I was watching like some MMA fighters break down games and stuff, and that's one of the ones they covered was and they were going over like the hip throws and stuff in there, and then you got like the really insane parts where the guy pulls out a sign and starts smashing someone with it.
exactly. Yeah, that game's awesome.
That's good.
Really cool.
Yeah, they have like all of them on Game Pass, I think.
Yep.
Or most of them.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
even actually started them because for the reason that it looks very cool and very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's get into tonight's subject a little bit, and in about 30 minutes, we don't have an actual trailer to run, so I'll just do like a quick spitball plug because we do have something coming up, and then we'll get into
Something
down.
very cool coming up.
yeah. So we're talking about tonight comics as the crossroads of nerd culture. So if you have enjoyed anything slightly nerdy, it's probably been influenced by a comic, or if you have read a comic, it's probably been in part some other part of nerd culture. And there's always these weird subsects where if you're into comics and you're also into something else, you're going to find someone in that other thing who's also into comics. Kind of no matter where you go, there's going to be someone who's read a comic at least.
I think this is. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say I think this is. Sometimes I don't get excited about some of this stuff, like the WandaVision. It's like, yeah, but I know the storyline in which she freaks out. That's been done like a few times in the comics. So again, if you're really in the comics, this new stuff comes out in the media. Everyone's like, oh, it's new, and it's like, no, this is all old stories that we've read years ago that just repackaged for you.
Yeah.
So.
But I do appreciate the value of those though, because it furthers spreading the crossroads. Because someone who has only like had MCU experience, I know a lot of people have gotten into comics because of MCU. Where they're like, oh, what's this cool fun thing? I want to get more into this. Or the people who are now getting into Eternals, you're I'm sorry about the state of your brain because the comics are insane compared to just like the tip of the iceberg that
what
was the
we
movie.
received on the big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have an existential crisis, Eternals is great for that.
Well, it's funny too because when I watch the Eternals, even my friends are like, "Who are the Eternals?" I'm like, characters even comic book people don't really care about. Like all these D-list characters. I mean, these are characters like, dude, we read the comics, we don't know anything. She acts just like, well, you read comics, yeah, and I read this one.
I was the fun guy because the twist in Eternals got me the most, being this person who's read Eternals going into it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been over 2 weeks, so we're going to spoil it. That's the rule of pop culture on the internet nowadays.
Yeah.
But choosing Icarus as the traitor as opposed to Druig was, it makes sense if you're doing like traditional storytelling. Like, oh, the guy who's clearly suspicious, he's not the traitor. But if you read a comic, it's always Druig. Never once has Icarus been the traitor.
Yeah.
Well, they did the same thing. I mean, the Black Widow's always supposed to be the traitor in the Avengers, and they never did that.
Yeah.
I think they were like, well, she's the only woman superhero we have, so we can't screw her over, right? But yeah, she was always the traitor. I told a friend that, and she's like, really? Why? And I'm like, I don't know. She's just always is. She's always the traitor in the book. She always betrays him.
Because she was a spy, and she's Russian.
Yeah.
I thought was also interesting is that Black Widow is also the only reason that the Immortals were not nuked in like their first their introductory volume. Black Widow was the person who gave the humans bad information that led to them not nuking Adelan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was fun.
See,
Yeah.
I was more familiar with the Inhumans than the Eternals.
Yeah.
That was always mine. And I told my friend, I'm like, look, the Eternals are basically, there's this guy, Jack Kirby, who wanted to make his own pantheon of gods. He went to Marvel, and I don't know, I'm going to mess up the story here, I think. He went to Marvel, one of them, made the Eternals. And then he left Marvel, something like that, and went to DC, made the New Gods. He was really obsessed about making these pantheon of gods, and the New Gods and Eternals are both. I think the Eternals too was the product of Jack Kirby's imagination.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
that was that. But he's also really into fusing mythology with technology.
Yeah,
and so you got that a lot with the Eternals, like the Earth Machine and all that.
Which I always thought it was funny in that movie that even my friend said, "Why would they make a robot deaf?" I'm like, I don't know. Why would they make her a little kid? You know, I mean, that just seems kind of mean. She doesn't age apparently or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it seemed weird to me that with as powerful as this sort of Celestials would be, that why don't they just make them straight human? Like to make a robot that looks like a human. I'm like, well, I'm sure they're a master of biological technology by then. Why they just make her human? But it was weird to make them look like different ages and stuff, and like the little kid. I mean, I understand they're supposed to be kind of the pantheons of the gods, but it just seemed a little weird. I thought it would have been cooler if the Eternals could change their appearance at will, like the machine could morph or something. But that would be too, I guess.
It kind of in the comics they touch on it a little bit, where it's more so that the Eternals are made to represent all the different paths that humanity could go down.
Yeah.
So anything that a human could look like would eventually is what there's an Eternal that looks like that in some way, like either has that disability or has that feature.
Yeah.
And there's
if they would have explained
like 5 other cities of Eternals, and there's a whole lot that the movie did differently.
Right.
And Tommy says, "Evening gents, looking good, except for Curtis."
Oh
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't get my beauty sleep. Sorry, Tommy. It's
but we're so getting into it, we kind of already talked about one of the biggest things that comics as an extension or as an intersection with other cultures has been that, especially in the main view for the past 2 decades, has been film and television. DC to a lesser extent, even getting beaten up by Image at some points, which is kind of fun. But Marvel definitely.
I would say until lately, until the Avengers came along, it was Marvel that could not make a movie, and it was DC that would kill it every time.
Yeah.
I mean, from the '90s with Batman all the way up.
Let's not forget Shaq's Steel.
Just before the Avengers, that was it. Oh yeah.
Or
Steel, played by
What a stinker.
Well, I think DC tried to. I think it's DC still smart to kind of separate out. I think the biggest thing that's the biggest hindrance of DC is, and the DC movies are my favorite movies, but to a lot of people, they kept saying the movies are too dark, and I'm like, yes, because Batman's in them. And like, what do you mean? I'm like, Batman lives at night. He hangs out at night. Gotham City, it's night. So even when they made Batman versus Superman, can you imagine the board meeting? Like, Superman's happy and go lucky. Batman is dark and brooding, and you're going to mix these two. Part of that movie is going to be dark by inherent nature of that character. So I hear people complain about it like Batman vs Superman is too dark. Yes,
Well, another thing I'd like to say about that too is, Batman in the comics, he, which they kind of flip flop back and forth, but he is a detective.
Yeah.
And so when he goes to JLA, any comics that I've mostly read, he's usually more the detective, the analytical person, all that. But see, they don't ever depict him as a detective, which supposedly the new movie is supposed to
that's I'm
take
super
care
stoked
of,
for the
which I'm
R-Bats.
glad for.
R-Bats.
I can't wait. But usually when we see him, he's the Dark Knight, and he's always in back alleys, and he's got all these wonderful toys.
Yeah, but
making those back alley deals.
So that's the part that the public knows of Batman is not him really being a detective; it's him being more of a brooding,
yeah,
right.
Martial artist.
I think that is what sold me the most on R-Bats over, because I was never into any of the Batfleck stuff. The Ben Affleck is fine, but the pacing as far as that era of DC movies very, very whack, and a lot of the dialogue felt unnatural. But it was. But having read the Batman comics, there is some very unnatural dialogue that happens a lot of times. That because a lot of his villains are very poetic. I mean.
Yeah,
more or less every Batman villain is a form of a meme.
Colorful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fact that it seems like they're leaning into that with the Riddler, but then also we got two cuts of R-Bats, one over a giant murder board that he's chalked out on the ground, and the other one is him as Bruce Wayne in the Gotham courthouse looking rather shell-shocked, kind of like, what is happening right now? I need to piece these together. I think those are what kind of sold me on his presentation of Batman, is seeing more of the merger of Bruce Wayne and Batman as like two different personalities trying to piece together the parts of puzzles.
I did like the fact that his suit seems a little more put together out of more common stuff. Like it all isn't all like handmade. Like he looked like he just got some military boots for his boots and some other stuff. That's a little interesting. I think it's supposed to be based on year one, and I think they mix a lot of the Long Halloween and year one together for the
it's year two is what they said.
Year two, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that, and we have potential Court of Owls tie-ins. I already had the full conspiracy theory about maybe Batman is the Talon who's being manipulated by the court at this point.
That would be a cool villain. I did read that. Out of all the Capullo stuff, I did read that series, and I really liked the Court of Owls. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Definitely. I always get the feeling like with Batman's villains, it's like Batman acts like he's actually in a TV series or a movie, and his villains act like they're on a Broadway play. When you think about the spectacle of how they behave, right?
Yes. I was was it his Grand Designs and the Joker War, that two runs from Tinian from like 2019 or 20. I'll go on without stop about these two arcs. It was a year of Batman that was so good, but it was just that, where it was Batman getting thrown into a Broadway play, with the designer essentially turning all of Gotham into a weapon, using 5 other supervillains' grand schemes against them in order to turn them all and capture Batman. And then Joker kind of retroactively playing some strings on that one as well, and then turning that in even a bigger nuclear inferno, which forces Batman to make one of the grandest changes I think we've seen in Batman in comics. So I'll go on about this for, but just this sheer scale of the escalation of that, because we've seen the Architect years ago. He's like, I'm just gonna blow up a couple buildings, and like they're big buildings, so Gotham's gonna look different in the skyline or whatever. Joker's going to Laughing Gas City or whatever. The Architect's like, no, I'm gonna turn every street in Gotham into a puzzle for the Riddler, and then every back alley is going to have a Joker clown set up. and then every sewer is in some way held by the Bureau and Catwoman, and is all like James Bondified with laser traps and everything like that. And it was absurd.
Well, that's even if you take that to the Arkham video games, when there just happens the Riddler's been busy putting Riddler trophies all over the city, and no one happened to notice this.
Yep.
I mean, they're fun, but I mean, it's like, man, the Gotham police force really sucks. And then I'm like, dude, there's a guy making traps that it's probably an art installation or something.
Exactly. It's that Broadway logic where everything's like, where everyone's like, yeah, it's sure, whatever. It's fine. Yeah. Of course he can do that. He's seen him dancing.
The third one, they have underground Batmobile chases. I mean, this is a video game with like
tank.
No one. Yeah. You just kind of go with it, I guess. Mask of the Phantasm. I would actually like it if they did the Mask of the Phantasm in a movie. I think that character would look cool. I think.
Yeah. We'll say DC's animation has been really good.
Oh
yeah.
Definitely. The guys at Warner Brothers do phenomenal stuff over there.
Yeah.
It's sometimes hit or miss, but they're getting a lot better. They're getting into their groove or whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny. So speaking of like things, there's some video games that cross into games. I still remember when the old Turok game came out.
Yes, I remember that game.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain games that came out that was like, well, this is a comic book, and then you were like, really? I'm amazed how many people I tell, like, they just see like a regular non-superhero movie, and I'm like, yeah, it's based on a comic. They're like, what, really?
Yep.
And
Road to Perdition, right? That was
Road to Perdition.
Yeah.
Why the Last Man? I think there was one of something with violence. Virgo Mortensen. Something was based on, like, I can't remember the whole name of the film.
History of Violence. I think.
History of Violence. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's tons of stuff. And I think people just think, kinds of superheroes, so superhero movies. But I think people are like, when they see, like, I was watching The Crow the other night. That was a comic. There's so many things that have come out. Yeah. Like, it's funny when I tell people about the Dredd movie. So many people online were like, "You mean they made a sequel to that horrible Stallone movie?" Like, not realizing Judge Dredd's been a comic since the 70s. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so there's been the amount of stuff that has come from comics and turned into movies is. I mean, they made a comic movie, that Ghost World, that famous comic.
Yeah, the indie movie. Yeah. Quinn, what you working on over there? It looks great.
I'm working on a secret project. Yeah.
So he reveals it to the internet. What a way to keep a secret there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Don't tell anybody.
If you only give one detail, like either the visual or the name, it's a teaser. If you give both, then it's breaking an NDA.
I'll go ahead and pop the title up here. Boom.
Nice.
Yes.
That looks great.
I'm so stoked for that.
I think this is going to be really, really good. I can't wait.
But
I always love how you have volumes.
Speaking
you have volumes to your drawings. You can see the dimensions and everything. Looks great.
Thank you. I try really hard and I try to do things that I'm not comfortable with so that I can get more comfortable with them so I can get better.
There you go.
That was my advice to tell upcoming artists. Like, what's the best advice? I'm like, draw outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Draw what you don't think you can. Because then you go back and draw the stuff you can. You'll be like, well, this is easy. It's like, yeah. Perspectives and stuff. Keep practicing that. It's like, it's going to look bad. I'm like, yes, it is. And it'll eventually look better. Just keep doing it.
Yeah. One of the things that one of my former bass instructors, Josh Fosker, and one of the things that he said was before you do something fast and well, you have to do it slow and well. So whenever I take that over to writing or art, I tell someone you have to do it slow and bad before you can do it fast and well.
So just remember, kids, when Tim was starting out writing, it was A, N, D, very slow.
Yes.
And look at the keyboard. That's how you start out, right?
That's like was it Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's top students. He always said, "Don't hide your poor technique with speed."
Yeah,
basically,
right.
Same kind of idea, right?
Yeah. That's like as you know, mentioned in the Comics Foo show that I talked about on the show, but you're interviewing Brad Graber, which holy crap!
Isn't that guy cool?
He's just cool, but yeah, that's rad.
Yeah.
But you you end up incorporating your art or your practice into your daily life or your motion, and being a practicing kickboxing, it's that same thing where your technique is all about just hitting impact first, and then it's about adding speed, and then it's about adding power. But the first thing is hitting your points of contact and making sure you're cover and you're hitting those right angles. And so taking that and like now applying that to writing and aspects or even painting and everything. I find myself hitting the same things where it's just hitting the points of contact and then going back and then reapplying each layer to that when I'm picking up a new technique.
Totally.
Well, I get myself in a real mess with the pencils, and then I like try to get myself out of it with the inks. So that's me. That's my strategy, if you want to know.
Yes.
Like, how am I going to do this?
That's when he whips out that box of crayons. Okay, time to get to work.
And sometimes it just does not work out. It just does not work out. Very frustrating when that comes along.
That's the same technique that Schwarzenegger used when he's in a movie with Van Damme or Lundgren. Is just, all right, they're doing martial arts, I'll whip something together and then we'll fix it in the edit.
Yeah, exactly. Shaky cam, right? Shaky cam fixes everything. That's great.
Strangely enough, I was listening to the last one you talked about, that pets and comic books. I just wanted to say, I was watching that the other night, and I kept thinking of all the pets in Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh yeah, true. That's true.
That's what I was gonna say. Like because I was watching after the fact. I'm like, what, those Scooby Doo? They had the Dino Mutt with Falcon.
Yeah.
I mean, Silverhawks had the Hawks. I think Snarf. I mean, it was like the list just goes down. Yeah. Like there's pets. I mean, even Flintstones had Dino, and I think the Astro.
Did you say Snarf from
Thundercats? I think he was he considered a pet? I guess
he was a pet.
Yeah. Cringer.
Yeah.
Cringer, Battle Cat. Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like cartoons seemed to be like the go-to place, and why I don't know they didn't translate the comics.
I would even say Grogu on The Mandalorian was really kind of a pet because he was a silent. Usually whenever you have a silent, character, it's kind of the role they fill. Yeah, that's what I think anyway.
Speaking of Snarf.
Oh no!
Here's a random fact
what comes next, because Snarf. I always hated Snarf.
So obviously he is Snarf, a Snarf from Snarf, related to Snarfer. Does anyone know his legal first name?
Ooh. Does he have one?
I know. I'm trying to think a legal name for Snarf. No, I don't know. Is this a trick question? Do you know the legal name for him?
His name is Osbert.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if I ever made it.
They got into his store enough to.
That was canon. Was established at some point and then quickly forgotten.
Wow! I never would have thought that. That's funny.
Yeah. So we obviously talked about comics translating to movies, which is kind of an obvious one for anyone who's been alive for more than 5 years at this point. Mm-hmm. But something that a lot of 80s and 90s kids are going to relate to is comics translating to Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
Given our already kind of talking on that, I'm going to get rid of on the face.
I think that's where our crossover happened. But it was weird because you did have something. You had Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but so many of the cartoons were like their own property. I mean, some translated in the comics, a lot of them were just their own property. But then again, I mean, even like the history of Transformers, like a lot of the original mythos and stuff was written by guys at Marvel. It was a Marvel guy that made up the names and stuff. G.I. Joe the same way. I think a lot of that was written. So I mean, you still had its
own like weird crossroads because it was originally just a toy made in Japan. Like, how do you sell this to Western kids? Well, they watch a lot of TV. We need to make a cartoon. Who writes cartoons? Let's get a comic guy.
Yeah. It's weird because even as a kid, we were always like, how does Megatron shrink to a gun? And like everybody was like, they had when they first launched, they had the camera, like the three robots turned into a camera. Well, what's fun about that?
About those guys. That's right.
Yeah, and you put it again, you had a little camera, or whatever. Yeah. And again, it was because the Japanese was fascinated by miniature things that turn into robots. Yeah. But it was everybody always thought like, well, was Megatron indestructible as a gun? Because if Starscream wanted to destroy him every time he transformed into Starscream's hand, why didn't he just break him in half? Or I don't.
True,
I don't
he
know.
shrunk down. The
Yeah.
other one was Robotech was fascinating.
Oh,
to
yeah.
see
Yeah.
how they combined those three disparate anime series.
Yeah, and
How
some
many
worked
that
and some
into-
didn't. Because I
Yeah.
remember the being a big Robotech fan, the transforming Veritex in the first one, and then the Master second series, the planes didn't transform, but the
Yeah.
tanks did. And then the third series, the planes transform again, but there's no. And it's like, wait, what? It's like they would get because there's three different series. So it was like
Yeah.
I remember like, yeah, we got rid of the transforming planes, and then we brought them back in the third one. It's like why? What?
Did you ever
So,
see when they did the Sentinels, where they actually did an original animation that they were trying
Yeah.
to bridge the gap, but they only got like through one or half an episode. or
half
something.
an episode.
Yeah.
I remember there were like
Yeah.
these robotic tiger things that were running around, and
Mhm.
and yeah, they tried. I mean, I actually just watched the Macross and the New Generation. I skipped the middle one, and I just kind of make it my own theory of why those two connect, and it actually seems to work really well, at least in my head. So I just because I
Yeah.
did not like the Masters at all. It was
My
like,
first introduction to Macross was through a PlayStation 1 game.
Oh, really?
oh
Yeah,
really?
Which is actually super dope. But then I got into the anime after that, and what was that weird? It was a Macross like OVA. It ran for like 6 episodes, but it was essentially them training up a like experimental pilot.
Oh, Macross Plus.
Macross Plus,
That
yes.
was really good.
That was really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually have the 4 episodes on there because they compressed it into a movie, and I actually got to see that at strange. A few months ago, in the last year, they played that movie in theaters just for
really?
one night. Macross Plus.
Oh.
I was like, really? I mean, this was made in like the mid '90s. Like, what is
Yeah.
this doing? And me and my friend went to it, and I'd never seen the movie. Well, I guess they truncated it and they added little extra scenes here and there.
That's really cool.
But it just why? Why would they? I mean, it was kind of cool they played it, but it was just like that's like all of a sudden them, out of all the old movies, like Akira and Ghost in the Shell are usually okay, but that was a weird one, so we took advantage of it and saw it. But
that was so me and some guys. I'm also part of a channel called Tabletop Collective where we do war games and stuff. And I have a video up of me playing. I beat one of our more veteran players at a Middle Earth strategy battle game using my Band of Urukai. But we've been talking about. There's this theory that we have that a lot of, given the rise of the internet and also the prevalence of comics led movies kind of bombarding everyone with nerd culture, and like a lot of things are becoming, it's okay to be nerdy now, give or take.
I know
that a lot of these sleeper cultures that had very like into it but not allowed outside of maybe the subreddit fan bases are now like sharing more of what they want and realizing that there's actually more of us than we thought there were. And one of those things I noticed that with is Robotech, and Gundam happened a little bit first because Gundam's had a little more Western success later on.
Yeah, I think with the models and stuff.
But Macross and Robotech, I've definitely received a boost from that. I think because it's like they've exploded in internet parlance, from what I gathered.
It's funny. We've always been kind of underground fans, and it was really weird because as a kid, like I had Robotech, it was always on a weird channel. I remember it was always like in the mid-afternoon on some weird like independent channel. It was never mainstream, not a lot. You had to kind of hunt it down
until Sci-Fi's Animonday in 2007 when they bought the licensing to Microtech, in which case if you were one of those people like me who got home from school and put on Sci-Fi at like 5 p.m. you got like 2 hours of anime, and Robotech was one of those.
Cool. It's it's funny. I tell you should watch Robotech. I'm like, it is a little dated. You kind of have to take that into effect. It is. I love Robotech, but it is a product of its time a little bit.
Yeah.
Macross Plus, I think, works better.
Yeah.
But I think there's more Macross stuff coming because of the licensing deal they finally made with Harmony Gold.
That's what
they finally came to an agreement, right?
How many years did it take them? What, 20?
Something crazy like that.
But something similar to like the weird licensing of how like Macross came to be is also same with like Transformers. And Japan has some weird properties as far as like how they're able to explode and stuff, and either like reverse into comics or come through comics into something else. I talked about this last week, but I'll show this again just for clout. My Eldorado Dark Magician.
Oh yeah.
But Yu-Gi-Oh started out as a guy writing a parody is a manga first, so manga are essentially comics, but more cultured. But yeah, he started out writing a parody of Magic. Magic was doing its beta test in Japan, and he had this like, well, this is like these freaking nerdy kids, and while this like became so good at their stupid card game, he became a god, and that's why he created Yu-Gi-Oh. This is a parody. He's tied in with someone at Konami, and the guy at Konami was packaging, and Konami's handling the packaging of the beta of Magic the Gathering in Japan. And so, if you guys don't know, that essentially every card game gets packaged by one company in Japan, like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, all get packaged by one company, and they just have different brands. But he said, "Oh, we can actually make this into a card game." He's like, "Great." He's like, "Well, how do we sell this to the West?" And I'm like, "Well, it was already a card game in the West, kind of." And like, "Well, no, we gotta do what we did with these other things. You gotta make a cartoon about it." So
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh anime, and then that ended up spawning even more manga, which ended up spawning more cards until the cards ended up outrunning the manga.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's and it's funny because manga is usually like you have the manga, you have the anime. A lot of times they're almost direct comparisons, like directly translated. Not all the time, because sometimes the anime is done before the manga finishes. But a lot of them are really, really close, design-wise or whatever. It's really Americans that will take movies and other things and make our own interpretations of the thing instead of direct translations.
Yeah.
We do and I've never tried to figure out exactly why. I think Marvel has done the most direct translations, started doing that. But even they changed up, and I've never quite understood this sort of like hesitancy to directly translate it. I mean, I know sometimes in movies they get more credit if they're creative in their movie, but I've never understood like, look, just directly translate what you see. I mean, the Sin City did that, and it worked great for them. The first movie did. So
I know sometimes when they've done that, it's failed horribly. Like I know that, like what is it, Japan's Spider-Man? They had all kinds of robots and stuff in there.
Yeah.
Because that's what all the Japanese kids were kind of into, and so their Spider-Man even today is like loads
totally
different.
Yeah.
Well, they ended up bringing. She ended up becoming Spider-Man, ended up creating a subset of Spider-Man, which is I have her name, but kind of like I have Armor, she has that same set where it is a younger Japanese woman who ends up creating a spider suit. They get like a spider mecha. I can't remember her name now.
Wasn't she in the multiverse?
Yeah, she's in the Spider-Verse, right?
She's in the Spider-Verse,
yeah.
And then but they end up spawning like how off the rails that Spider-Man like an adaptation when they end up spawning like a set of comics off that, which created her eventually.
One thing, kind of bringing up on that on interpretations, I'd be curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on the Amazon Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
because that's
all I know is what I've heard, and I've seen some pictures.
Yeah,
it's so early that story wise. I mean, I have, a lot of the times I never read the Lord of the Rings as a kid. I mean, it's through the movies. I mean, I was in the D&D, but I don't know. I never read I just never read the books. But I always just kind of look at Lord of the Rings movies as big D&D movies. Maybe that's my saving grace. So even when I watch like The Hobbit movies which everyone hates, I just look at them as big D&D adventures, so they don't bother me.
Yeah.
Because that's technically because D&D stole so much from Tolkien. I mean, they literally wanted to play Tolkien, so I just like, well, this is Dungeons and Dragons on screen, so I never cared. So if I look at the new Lord of the Rings as like, well, this is a bunch of like D&D characters running around, that's cool. If I attribute it to the book, what I've heard about, I would say I probably have problems, but I didn't understand the big hubbub about like all the what they did with the elves. I'm like, I know. I never.
Well, the thing I noticed immediately, the picture was the Dwarven King Queen. I don't know, a little weird. It being a woman, and I don't know. There's just I believe in diversity, but at the same time, I just, I think you can take that stuff way too far.
I think if you stray too far, again, this goes back to the question, like, why can't they just directly translate it? Why does it have to?
That sect of dwarves were mostly matriarchal. It was the had a patriarch. There's like several different dwarven kingdoms. And so this is going to be more based in the north because it explores the ranges of Dunedain. And this being someone who I'm a giant Tolkien head, so I'm actually
you probably know more than me.
You'd be the one to ask.
So I'm very excited to see. I'm a little hesitant with anything touched by Jeff Bezos. He's going to launch into space. But most of I know some people who work over at Amazon Video, and they're all like super great, awesome nerds. They ended up making the last couple seasons of Expanse, which have been fantastic. And it's a different team, but I have to believe that when you're building a company, you look for people that share that same kind of DNA. So I have to hope that you get that same level of nerddom and appreciation for it. But the Rangers of Dunedain, it's gonna be weird. It's existing in it's a quasi separate timeline, but it's kind of the same thing as like a secret history where there's not enough explained at this period of time to really like be in or out of continuity. But I'm hoping for it to be like the one thing that I can finally tell someone's like, well, you got to read Children of Hurin. How else expect to get it if you don't read Children of Hurin or the Silmarillion?
For me, the funny thing is kind of touching on the diversity aspect, right? Is I always felt a little off-put in all the Lord of the Rings things that they never got people who were little people to play the hobbits or I always felt like, my gosh, like if I was somebody of that stature, right, I would be like, this is my chance for representation. We get screwed over in every movie, and this is the one opportunity that we have to be the hero. And you would rather spend millions of dollars shrinking down a person that's the high, that where I'm already this high, right? And so that's the one thing I don't get is if you're going to have any form of diversity, why not get some little people?
No kidding.
Also, like the only people of Asian descent were the Easternlings, who are noted as being evil slavers.
The only reason I can say this, I'm not making an excuse for this. So take this, I apologize for offending anyone on the internet. Because I think the hobbits are supposed to be smaller versions of. So they weren't supposed to look like halflings. They were supposed to look like small children.
I see the proportions.
Does that the proportions? I think they were supposed to. Nothing against short, but I think if you saw people who were short on screen, you were like, well, that's a human being that suffers from, or not suffers, but is of that stature. They were supposed to look like small children. That's what I remember in the book, and I think that's what they're going for. They just basically look like just small little human beings. I think that was the only reason why, but I never got it either. I mean, they did that in Willow. I mean, they had all the in Willow and stuff. Which
also
I thought
the Witcher series. The Band of Dwarves were actually like a full like acting crew of little people, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah. And I have nothing. I mean, again, that's the only reason I can think of why. Because in the books, I remember they were supposed to look like small children. That's what I remember them saying. But that could be just an excuse. I don't know. I just remember seeing that because I remember them saying like, because a lot of the times when they did the backup shots of the hobbits in the films, the hobbits were played by children.
Yeah, you can see by the way they would walk. They had that kind of springiness.
That was supposed to be the idea. So I think it's just proportion-wise. That's why they went that way. I don't think it was supposed to be any sort of hit against small people or that way. I think it was just
I know a lot of people are really up in arms about the whole thing. And what's funny to me about it is that a lot of the people that are up in arms is people that usually are calling us idiots for caring so much about one thing or the other and saying, all kinds of disparaging comments toward people who aren't down with the changes. And now they've like flipped, and now they're talking about Lord of the Rings. You should. There was one guy in particular. He's been a real critic of like Comicsgate and all that kind of stuff. And it ends up he's like coming out saying a lot of the same stuff that Comicsgate was saying about comic books. He was saying, some things you ought to just leave alone. And, as far as diversity is concerned, if there's a character that you have that's already established, what we've said on here before several times, then you shouldn't be, messing with it or, trying to change it for
Right.
the masses. And I just find it interesting. And it goes back to what I've always said. If you don't care about something, it's very easy for you to judge people who have grown up with that particular thing and they really intentionally care about it. And, because for them, it's like part of their childhood. It's part of their experience. It's some of us, it's how we even got into stuff, nerddom, comics or whatever. And then you turn around and you take something that we've lived with for all this time, and you say, well, we're making this for a different audience. Yeah, people are going to get upset. But see, everybody's like, oh, you're a Neanderthal. You don't know. You shouldn't say anything, you're just giving these people a hard time. But see, then you hit something that they care about, and then all of a sudden their views are like our views, and I find that an interesting double standard.
Well,
but you live and learn.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing too, in the things, I know the elves, and I don't know how they would do this, but the elves in the movie is supposed to be like borderline at 7 feet tall. I mean, they're supposed to be incredibly tall.
Yeah, in the movies they're taller, but in the literature they're actually supposed to be like a little shorter than humans because of the.
Oh, are they really?
Same thing like D&D, yeah.
Oh,
or elves supposed to be very lithe and flowy and that's how they sprint from tree to tree. Is they're supposed to be like shorter in life.
I think honestly, out of all the stuff you can adapt, I think Lord of the Rings is a little dangerous to adapt. When they adapted the books, I think that works, but when you adapt other stuff, that fan base is like the Star Wars and it's so. I think it's a little dangerous. I think they should just make up their own thing.
Yeah, but I think what's also a little like a bit of their saving grace is, especially after the Hobbit movies, the Tolkien before then and then especially afterwards, the Tolkien state has been very picky with who they let adapt their work.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we
That's
stopped
one
seeing.
thing I've trusted in with this whole thing. I think it's going to have to be okay because I mean, as good as Lord of the Rings was the movie from New Line Cinema, they were not happy with Peter Jackson on a lot of points. So that tells me, they're watching out for their estate. They're not,
Yeah.
Well, they were going to make a Conan TV series, and I don't know if that's still happening. I would assume with the modern climate, I don't think a Conan series would go very well.
It's one of those things where it's like in development, but I think so many directors have come off and on of it
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, although I think honestly we're at a better state of getting our Metal Gear movie, given the fact that you already have a director, writer, and lead assigned to it.
Yeah. All they have to do with that movie, and the Metal Gear people, if you're listening to this, or some weird chance, make the first game. That's it. You just need to make the first game, Metal Gear. In fact, you can make the NES game if you want, but you can make the original PlayStation 1 Metal Gear Solid. Just make the game. It's the perfect movie. You don't need to add anything. You don't need to change it.
I believe the rumor, like obviously we don't have anything in stone because the writer's been very hush-hush about it, but I believe the rumor was that they're going to adapt the first game.
Okay.
But honestly, I'd be interested in seeing them maybe tie some. If they were to do, create their own like a little bit of canon for it, if they were to explore the time between Metal Gear 2 and Twin Snakes,
I could see that
with Snake and Master Miller and doing all that, because also then we get to fill in some spots from Metal Gear 5 with what happened to Miller and Kaz after or if they were to do the time that Snake and Otacon were operating as philanthropy between 1 and 2.
Right. Have you guys played Metal Gear, other Quentin and Curtis?
Yeah.
All of my friends have, and I have not. It's one of those like Fallout 4 that I was gonna play, and I was gonna play, and I was gonna play, and I just never did.
Oh, trust me.
And by the time by the time I got around to it, I kind of the news wore off of it. I had so many spoilers. I really wasn't.
Honestly, what you could is you could just go to YouTube, type in Metal Gear full movie. You'll get like 20 hours of cutscene.
Yeah. He is he wanted to be a movie maker per se. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of excited about Lord of the Rings. I personally, I would be more excited for Conan, but like again, I don't think in this modern climate, a true to form Conan show would fly well. Just
That's my
what
thing. When I
depicts.
hear them making something that I like, I always get like frustrated and
Yeah.
scared. It's like
Yeah.
this whole Amazon thing. I've been from the beginning, man. They're gonna mess it up. They're gonna mess it up, and I'm just gonna watch it. I'm just gonna watch out for it and see what people say. And
Well, I know
uh,
they are making a Robotech movie.
Mhm.
That's
Really?
one of the reasons why the new deal was made. The new Harmony Gold deal was made, so they can get distribution in America and Europe because of the movie they're making.
Wow.
To me, I'm like, Macross is such a long form series that I mean, I could see them maybe doing the movie when they actually launch, like they warp the Pluto and just end the movie at that. It would have to be a long form movie. I think if they did Robotech straight up military, made it like a more military and less goofy like Transformers, I think they could really nail it. I just know that me and Tom thought like the transformation of the Veritech is one of the most classic, simple transformations of all of the robots, and we're just afraid they're going to overcomplicate it like the Transformer movies. They've always been like, no, don't do that, don't.
Yeah.
It's very simple and it's very iconic the way it transforms. So yeah.
So I'm going to offer a counterpoint here. So while offering like the military or like even like the Top Gun training style like adaptation of Macross would probably make no sense. There's another Robotech property that featured almost nothing of that. It was in fact I don't remember the exact name of it, but do you guys remember the one where the machines were powered by music, and it was essentially in like a space cruiser, and like they had like the pop rock band that was flying.
Macross in Japan, it's always been music and mecha.
Yeah.
I mean, and the further it goes, like the crazier it gets. Like they lose all that military, and it's all singing and pop culture. So like I said, Robotech is the American version is a little more military. The Japanese version of Macross is very much. I mean, I think they defeat the Centrati with music and
and it's gonna give me an image. It's not gonna be the title. That's unfortunate. But yes. Give me the title. Give me the title. I think this is Macross F.
Okay,
yeah. But that's military title would make a lot more sense. But
it would
make the musical like rock band, this like hyper poppy like Japan Idol style adaptation. Do it, you cowards.
I have a friend who I used to watch Robotech, and she's like, I hate Min May, and like nobody likes Min May. Okay, everybody likes Lisa Hayes because she was a cool one, right?
Yeah.
It's like and nothing against, but she's just like this annoying woman who just it's just nobody likes her. So it's like
okay, I remember. It might be F or Delta, but yeah, it's the one that featured the lead character had like the John Lennon glasses and carried a fender with them in the cockpit.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's the Japanese versions of some of that are just like it's almost like they want to sell the pop idol stuff. I think Macross Plus worked because it had that sort of military, like they were testing fighter jets to see which one would be the next one. But they even had like the AI. Yes. They did a good job with the music and stuff. But there's always a silly side to Macross that I'm like.
I think also it might be the more extreme, but a lot of like Japanese, like I mean, rightfully so. A lot of Japanese art is very much like an anti-war piece. I mean, that's the like every Gundam series boils down to war's bad. Maybe we should just stop the whole idea.
I always think it's funny in so many like not just Gundam but Japanese series. It's like some guys like, I'm going to destroy billions of people to stop war, and it's like that's like the plot of I'm like, so you're gonna kill tons of people. It's like, how is that?
It's always they do like
kind of reminds me of Thanos.
Yeah. Well, they do the extreme end of the relatable villain. Like the villain has like a just cause, but the worst means possible, and like it's really the worst means when it comes to anime. And the hero's like, I get what you're going. but let's try this instead.
Oh yeah, it's I've never quite got, and every Japanese villain in manga is always altruistic in their motives. They're just going to do this horrible genocidal action to, at the end they will thank me for killing all these people or whatever or something, and I'm just like, what? And that's why people say, like, well, they always give the villain monologue in American comics. Like, you should hear the ones in the manga. Because sometimes you're just like, wait, what? Like,
hold on.
what
Speaking of fighter pilots and stuff, I'm going to take over the screen here for a second. But coming up next month, we do, in fact, have
that looks great.
Yeah.
He's this
is our not commercial. This is this is the new cover for Sex and the City, the Silverline cover. So we are doing my book here, Wolf Hunter, is actually coming out next month on Kickstarter. You'll be able to pre-order it then.
Yeah,
and it'll be on Indie Planet in the following weeks. And I'll be shilling it at I know Daytona Beach for sure. I'll be at that convention, and I'll try to also make it out to either Rose City or Eugene. And try and show it there. But it is our World War II secret history spy story. It's planes, trains, and automobiles meets Murder on the Orient Express.
Nice.
With a whole lot of spy stuff.
A comedy.
Yeah,
it's a comedy.
Yeah, it's a comedy where you get into Churchill's Secret War and the fun things that come with. I deal with such fun, lighthearted topics as grievous war wounds, PTSD, domestic counterintelligence.
Yeah.
I love that. That cover looks great.
It's so good. But yeah, we were talking earlier about like Quentin adding volume to his drawing, and this is Quentin's cover. And you can tell Willard has a rib cage in there. Like there was a lot of there was a lot of man in that chest.
Don't you walk around like that, Tim? Come on.
I just like yeah, exactly.
I don't want to say anything, but I feel kind of funny looking at your cover, Quentin. Maybe it's the coat. I don't know. Is it the tie? So he kind of reminds me almost like the Captain America guy a little bit, the way his hair. I guess Steve Rogers always kind of.
Yeah, well, that's a very common haircut in the 1940s. So there's when you work in the 1940s, you have like very limited options when it comes to men's hair. Either you're bald, you got this, you're shaved. Either bald or shaved headed, you got this, or you got the curtain cut, which you see in.
What's the other book that? Because usually we launch both Silverline books in Paris. Do you know the other book launching with this?
We do not know the other book at this time.
Okay.
Yeah. I was
Shadow Ghost.
Oh my gosh! I gotta go.
I gotta get drawn.
Yeah. Now Chris is going to fill the rest of the hour talking about how he finished Shadow Ghost in the last.
You just kind of see the book, the art just kind of like de-escalate to the end. It's just like stick figures out of crayon.
Yeah. There's definitely some indie comics from like. Predominantly like the late 90s, early 2000s, but the point where like a lot of smaller studios were closing and people were like, I need to get this project out because I still have the rights to it. I need to just get it somewhere. And as you can see, like, the last page, they had like 2 hours to get this to market.
Yeah. And then why did the book not do well? I wonder.
You'd see like fill-in artists, like you just see like, one book by 5 different pencilers.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. And it's like jarring. It's like watching a movie where there's a different actor, as they're editing.
Yeah.
Well, that's always every time. I talked to my friend who's also a comic book artist, and I'm like, the biggest like turning point of whether somebody likes to do comics is the grind. Just the idea of making the book, because you see them, they get stars in their eyes, and I'm gonna make the best comic, and it's gonna cure cancer and solve world peace and all that, and then they got to sit down to get past page 2, and I'm like, this is work, and I'm like, keep going. This is why I always find it funny. When people online, it's like, it took me, 3 years, but I finally finished my 22-page comic.
You really have to be excited about a book you're doing, especially if you're doing it and doing the art, because you get the idea and you're thinking, that is so cool.
Yeah.
And then you sit down for hours and hours and hours drawing that scene that just popped in your head like a movie, and it was so good, And here you are having to draw every little line of the cloth that they're wearing and every little thing in the background. You got to be excited about what you're doing. And
Listen to all your friends like, what are you guys doing? We're playing video games. What are you doing? Drawing.
yeah,
Mhm.
I've
Being
been
a-
on both sides, and I tell you, I almost like reading the script from somebody else and working on somebody else's stuff. There is a little bit of I don't know. There's but like when it's my stuff, I'm like I want so bad to get to this part, to get
Yeah.
to that part, and
Yeah.
you know, uh,
And before we get into like our back on the subject, but kind of hitting on that, another reason why I like working with other people on comics as opposed to because I've done the 50,000, 60,000 word novel, and that's a lot. But working on comics, it hits differently. Well, one, you're writing like 22 pages, like 6 issues, you can be about the same like time spent behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
But the amount of exposure you have to your own work, I feel really impacts your motivation to do it. Because if my exposure to my work is only just getting the script out to Quentin, that's a lot easier than if my exposure is doing the full 50,000 words and then editing that.
Yeah.
Because you end up seeing so much of everyone's stuff that, like, by that point, your taste has already increased beyond what you've made. So it looks like absolute butt. So chat, keep in mind while we sell you on the idea of suffering for comics, your own work is always going to look like butt to you because you've been exposed to it for however long you've been working on it. Someone who's not been exposed to it that much, it's going to be new and fresh to them.
yep.
Oh yeah.
That's definitely me. All I see is my mistakes, and other people like.
Well, I see that too, Quinn.
Have I ever given you a note back? It's like, I don't think I've ever given Quentin a note. So I'm just like, yes, holy crap.
Man, let me tell you, and every time I turn something into somebody, I'm like, he's probably going to change it a couple times, because I did this over here and I did that over there, and and then with especially with that cover, I was like, well, he probably is going to want some more stuff in there, maybe, and I turned it in. You're like, cool. I was like, oh, okay.
No.
Okay, we'll go with that.
I'm so used to my working for clients. They got to nitpick everything, and then right there, I always think of the same thing with the comic book guys. But I think these writers are so happy that somebody's drawing their stuff that they're like, well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't quit drawing it. So whatever you bring in is awesome.
But one thing I was going to say is, you're talking about further back DC and the animated films and stuff like that. Several of my friends are directors and producers and stuff like that worked on those films and stuff like that. And I'll play video games with them, Dead by Daylight or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of them shocked me, and it's something that kind of motivates me. Is one of them who, he even did storyboards for like some of the Marvel movies, right? And work with James Gunn, and he's working with Zack Snyder now. And he flat out told me once, he shocked me. He says, I just wish I could sometimes be doing what you're doing. And I was like, are you crazy? Like, you're working with, Zack Snyder and stuff right now. And he goes, I put all my heart and soul in all these professional projects and films and things. He goes, I don't have time to work on it. That's why I'm playing games with you guys, because this is how I let loose. I can't go home after doing this for like a 12-hour day and then work on my own project. He goes, I have a day job and I also teach my martial arts. And I was shocked to hear somebody with his pedigree say that, but he basically said you're free to work on your own project. And so that's something, as hard as it gets, often keeps me going, is thinking, oh, I am really fortunate that I'm in this position. I think all of us are, that we're seeing our own stories come to life, and that, that's huge. There's people that are more well received commercially, but they don't have that option, so.
And now we just need to get people to buy and read them. That's the main goal. That's like if I was working for Zack Snyder, he's also got that where, like, through Zack Snyder, you could probably get a lot of connection, get your stuff seen by more people. So there's, I think, a two-way street a little bit with that. I mean, would I love that connections like that in Hollywood? Yeah, there might be ways to get my stuff seen by more people that have more money that could disseminate it, help me with marketing, when you're doing your own. So yeah.
Although I think sometimes from my experience too is, it's like, those people have their own projects that they want to greenlight, and they have it. It's not like, somebody that's a big time film director like that necessarily is like, oh, thank goodness somebody has the idea for me, right? They want
their own stuff or whatever. Yeah.
And I think that's where the comic books, kind of to bring it back full circle, the comic book comes into play. If we can manifest our stories in a comic book, right? Like I was watching a documentary about the Goon animated series, that animated movie that was supposed to come out, right?
Oh yeah, the one by
It was
supposed, it was all CG and
yeah. But I mean, that's because he had created it and it was out there, and that's why like Tim Miller and those guys actually wanted to do it. So I think we're on the right track. I hope.
Yeah, because it's strangely enough, I noticed that a lot of times, they want to see a proof of concept.
Yeah.
And then if you give them because I think he actually kickstarted that little short film for the Goon.
He did.
It was, I mean, it was really cool. And it was well done. I don't know if they can make. I can see a TV series of the Goon. I guess just because I don't know if a comic series. There's so much to it. Like I don't know if a one movie would do it justice. I think I could see like a 30-minute cartoon series for it or direct to video.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard. I can't name names, or I shouldn't. But I've heard stories about some of the top guys that have worked on animated films, and I can say it after we're off the show. But they even have a hard time getting things greenlit, and studios will actually favor somebody who has an independent comic book over somebody who's an animated director who has decades of experience, because they don't want to invest the money in it, you know. So I've had some of my contacts tell me like, oh, you're better off doing a comic book, because I've been in the industry for like 25 years and I can't get anybody to take my pitch.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So
I wonder if it's just because they feel the comic book guys don't know what they're doing, so they can give them less money or lower budget, and they would be happy with anything. Almost in a way where I've heard nothing against the video game industry per se, but a lot of times they'll bring in like eager young people who want to model, do concept art, whatever, and just work them to death, and they underpay them and overwork them because they're just so excited to be working in video games that they get the 3-year burnout, which has been known in video games. And then once they're out, they bring in a new batch of young kids with the same starry-eyed look.
That's another thing that factors in is built-in marketing, because especially since the Silver Age of film, most of a studio's budget is going to be towards its marketing.
Yes.
As much as you spend on the movie, you're going to spend 3 times that much on marketing. And it works the same for any sort of animated show or series. So for anything where, and a lot of that ties into multimedia marketing, you know, you always get the printout on, you know, your Doritos or on your Mountain Dew or whatever, or they have like the little pamphlet or like the 3-pager that's in your like 7-Eleven selling whatever they have going out. But if all they need to do is create like a simple flyer that points to a comic that's already in existence that they don't need to pay for,
that already has somewhat of a fan base to it.
Yeah, they can chop out all their multimedia marketing budget, because that's just going to something that already exists.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I would like to think as a creator, I think we kind of stake our claim with our comic book. I mean, you know, if any of our projects were to go into a different facet of media, I would like to think that, I would hope that at least the fact that we've put the story in this fashion, right, that gives more validity than just throwing a pitch out there. But I think it also kind of comes back to what Quentin was saying, like, why would you pay all this money for a fan base and then say, but we don't want you guys, we're going to do it our own way? That's ludicrous, you know, that you're kind of undercutting yourself. So there we go. Back to the beginning.
But cutting to one of the ways that has worked for indie comics since the creation of the zine, which if anyone has read a zine, that's already your claim to fame. But big ups to the Blood and Steel boys from North Carolina skateboard scene. You got to pioneer that whole zine marketing idea. But the biggest thing for zines was word of mouth. And then that kind of spread on, and something that has always worked in well with the word of mouth is the gift of gab, and comics and hip hop have featured a very long and almost like a surprising at the time, but now if your favorite rapper is almost expected to make, well, like talking like, you know, rappers here, not your mainstream Drakes or whatever. Okay. They're going to make a reference of some sort. I mean, we've had like the big like interface like rap about comics, or he had like Adam Warrock, Mega Ran, who is still huge right now, MC Lars, MC Front a lot. But I mean, Curtis and I talked about this before the show, and we'll probably be more of what the media we talk about. But you also have the guys like the guys in Wu-Tang would read comics in studio, and they like sneak lines or whatever into recording. RZA still does that. MF Doom, who rest in peace. His entire persona is based off of Doctor Doom, and but he was still very talented, very positively received hip hop artist.
Definitely, and like Ghostface Killer, his alternative alter ego. He actually called himself Iron Man.
Yes,
and he called himself Tony Stark before the mainstream knew what that was.
Yeah,
and even put like snippets from the old Iron Man cartoon inside of his albums.
Oh
yeah.
Yes.
It's a huge thing. Definitely.
And I don't know, like, I mean, it also gets featured a bit like in metal to an extent, but metal kind of shares a more of an extent with like video games to a point.
They do. I mean, there's been. I mean, Anthrax's "I Am the Law."
Anthrax,
which is
Anthrax had a bunch of Judd references. Beyond that, even
there's a lot of Lovecraft songs in metal and stuff. I think metal almost. I know there's a lot of people in metal kind of go towards more the horror movies, horror route. I mean, look at Rob Zombie, White Zombie, that sort of stuff.
But Rob Zombie is also a huge Marvel fan. He not as prevalently, but he did drop references to Hulk at times, or to even crossed in DC and did like a Swamp Thing reference on the middle of an album.
No, I think was it Joe Satriani too back in the day, the guitarist. He had that album Surfing with the Alien where he actually had the silver surfer.
Yes.
Like that,
yeah.
Cool. There's definitely a more. I would say metal crossover. Probably hip hop crosses more with comics than I would say metal per se. Metal is very much fantasy. I mean, I see a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff. I mean, you go to European metal. There's tons of like Blind Guardian. You guys know Blind Guardian. Yeah, they're like the biggest metal. I think they're probably bigger than most. Blind Guardian's a little hit or miss with me. I have a favorites of their songs, but a lot of the stuff is Lord of the Rings, fantasy, epic quest. That seems to be more metal, less.
Iron Maiden, oddly enough, though, did take inspiration from, was it Terrifying Adventures or was it Horrifying Adventures? The horror brand of Detective Comics at the time before they merged.
Oh
yeah.
And Glenn Danzig, let's not forget the Danzig logo was from Crystar the Crystal Warrior. And I used to see Danzig at comic book conventions every month out at the Shrine Auditorium out in LA.
Yeah.
And he was just the coolest guy. He would be in line and he'd be talking to like a 12-year-old kid that was a big fan and the guy's the guy's mom. And he was he would go into the convention like anybody else,
Yeah.
I think comics being the cross culture, I think used to be, now maybe not so much anymore, but it used to be a more entry level way to define stories. I mean, when I was growing up, comic books was a way that I could afford those stories, books or comics. I couldn't. I mean, they didn't have movies to buy back then. I still remember when you could buy movies on VHS, and the reason they started selling movies is a lot of time you could only rent them, and after they the tape wore out or whatever, they would sell them, and most of the people would get movies that way recorded off TV. And of course the studios were like, well, we're not going to do that, we're going to sell our own, so they started selling VHSs and movies. But like, even to see movies, you had to catch it on TV. Video games were expensive even back then, the kids. So I think comic books was a cheap way to still stay involved in that fantasy adventure and stuff. And I think strangely enough, there was a cross breed of like Saturday morning cartoons, and then you get all excited and go read your comics. I remember reading comics and stuff too. Nowadays, I think the reason why comics doesn't hit as well is because it's such easy access to move. I mean, look at, imagine growing up with like Netflix or video games where you have like, even like the Game Pass on Xbox is a service you can just download any game you want. I mean, that's hard to compete with that when, even as a kid, I sit there and think like, I complain about that. I'm thinking, what if I was a kid now? Would I be in the comics? Probably not. Probably in the video games and stuff. I mean, even toy sales are hitting. I mean, if it wasn't for adult collectors of toys, they would have gone a long time ago. Kids don't buy as many toys as they did more games and stuff. Yeah, I
think like if it wasn't for like Comixology Unlimited is such a like an insane deal that I think that's like. If you're trying to get anyone new into comics, the person's like, okay, you're going to go to Comixology, you're going to spend $1, and there's like there's going to be like 7,000 titles for you. Just pick one. Just pick a fun cover and go at it.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you get them into it. But
although I've heard lately they have been really messed up by Amazon going in and changing their UI and all that stuff.
the new UI is actually, yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
The
complaints to the UI, I think, are honestly just from there's a certain, if you're working in UX design, which I've done a little bit. I used to do UX testing at Wargaming Labs, the guys who make World of Tanks and World Battleships. They used to do their testing. And there's a methodology when you're creating revision where there is always going to be people who don't adapt well to technology, and you kind of just forget about them. Because otherwise nothing's going to get changed. And they're always the most vocal crowds. But honestly, like the app for me, it works a lot cleaner. Like it stalls out a lot less. Less load times, things download a lot quicker. It's much easier to find my titles.
You're a lot different than most people, though, Tim. I mean, come on, let's be honest here. Come on, help me out, guys. Isn't Tim a little different?
I think we're all
well, I mean, that's such a huge subject. How long do we have left of the show?
Yeah, no.
I mean,
why is so much of his brain dedicated? But
it was I looked on there. The one thing they took off, and maybe I didn't find it because I looked at it the other night. It took off the publisher tab, where you could find publishers, and that was really fun because instead of looking for comics, you could find a publishing company and look at their titles, and that was actually really fun. But they took that off, which is like really kind of frustrating. Because that's how I'd find a lot of titles and stuff. I would look for the publisher.
I think what they did is they kind of hid that a little bit more because they wanted to draw emphasis to the creator tabs. Okay. Because so many creators now, like, if you're a writer or an artist, if you work with just one company your entire career, that is rare. But usually you're drawn to someone's writing style, someone's art style. So I think they wanted to draw more emphasis to the fact that you can search by, your artist or your writer of choice. Okay. You can even search by editor, I think. Which if you're buying comics by editor,
that's different. Yeah, I'm trying to think the last time I'm like, well, I only read comics edited by Jim Shooter or something. That's a little different.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, there are people who, their threshold of why they read.
One day I'm going to grow up and be an editor.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, some of us aspired to that, and then we got forced into writing.
Yeah.
But
Roland was an editor. He would edit people. That's why he's always trying to tell me what to do.
Exactly. Something that I wanted to go doubling back to talking about, the topic, crossover hip hop and that culture comes to comics, and also talking about marketing comics in general, especially for a lot of indie comics at the time. Underground hip hop was kind of considered like the conversation exists today, but it was very prevalent like in that time where unless you're underground, you weren't rap or hip hop. If you had a record label, like you were pop or R&B.
You sold out. That's the whole out kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was like, NWA getting their record deal was like a whole thing, and like really, like the reason why like there's so much drama around it is because like this is weird. Like these 9 dudes are getting huge now. Yeah. And they fought hard for their contract too. Again, to be exactly the way they wanted it to be. Yeah, whether or not that worked out. Yeah. But for like people working like indie prints at the time in zines, they had to, they're kind of working the same thing. We're like, no, man, it's not Marvel, it's not DC, it's my own like brainchild, man, and I'm printing it out in like this newspaper print that I found in my uncle's backyard. And so a lot of like underground shows or whatever, like you'd have this crossover where you'd have the rappers selling their merch on one table, and then you'd have some guy from the neighborhood selling zines on the next table. Skate parks too were also big at that, where you had like the punk band and the zine and the rapper and whatever. It's like this weird amalgamation. That was when I talk about a little bit on the show, but not too much. But I'll talk about like my love of skateboard culture and like skate park culture in particular, because that's what it was for a while, where it was just like this weird amalgamation. Is like going into the nerdiest like Saturday market, where it's just everyone is selling something out of their like trunk.
Well, and that's that entrepreneurial spirit, right? And that's what's so
Yeah.
cool. And even more so as a creator of anything now, especially with online and all that stuff, it's like it is an amazing time. I mean, unfortunately, the water gets muddied, right? Because it's like they say, never give an idiot a microphone. But when everybody has a microphone, there's going to be some idiots on the stage, unfortunately, right? But I mean,
I don't know. You keep finding yours, Curtis.
I bring my own. To every show.
I bring my own microphone.
You can't steal it. But yeah, no. But that's one of the cool things about that zine culture. There was a zine I used to love called Giant Robot.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I used to love that. It was like this kind of like Asian pop culture stuff, and it was really cool. And it's that same idea you hear about, like those early day pioneers of rap selling stuff out of the trunk and things like that. It's like
stuff like what?
Like,
it'd be like it was like zines, mixtapes. Oh my gosh.
Guns, drugs, rock and roll.
The culture's still alive and well in some points, especially like Portland. If you go to the right street corners in Portland, like it's a great time. But last time I was at Rose City Comic Con, it's the same thing. Reyes had like this local rap group, like that. It's like 5 rappers, or whatever, like all selling like their mixtapes or whatever, like at a Comic Con.
That's so cool.
That's great.
It's the hustle.
It is the hustle. I wonder, the internet let you reach a bigger audience. And I think it's a weird sort of dichotomy or perspective, because like before the internet, when you were selling that stuff, you had your own crowd, you had your own people who knew you, and you can kind of support yourself this way. But now when you go in, people expect, like, if you're not making it big or making tons of money, you're not doing it well. If like, say you have a small group of people that like you, people are like, yeah, but if only like so many people like you, like you're not using, like, for instance, I remember when I first started, like, Instagram, I got like 200 people following me or whatever. And one guy was like, that's it. That's nothing. Considering like, I'm just happy with that. But it's like, yeah, but you have the internet. You should have like billions of people following you. And it's just a different mindset where I'm like, no, I'm just happy with the small little group of people.
Well, and it's also perception, right? Because
people
can buy likes, they can buy subscribers, you can do all this stuff. And I've talked to Roland, and we won't say which ones, but I've seen some Kickstarters and crowdfunding campaigns where you go, there's no way that they were able to secure this many people on a first time out. And I think for some people, it's this kind of idea of, fake it till you make it. So, borrow $10,000 and invest it in your own Kickstarter so that it goes full within 24 hours. There was stuff that I saw in the comic book industry when I was working with Roland, where you would see some companies, the whole goal was to sell a company, right? So whatever you had to do to make the metrics look that way, you would do. It didn't matter if things were bleeding money financially, as long as you made the sale before the thing. So that's kind of, you bring a good point, because the metrics aren't accurate,
right. It's a lot of people, and there is something to be said about that sort of underground, fans or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's almost like that's not even considered successful now. I mean, back then, if you had a small group and small comic, you're like, oh, that's you're successful. But now, unless you are making it on the internet in some fashion, I consider successful. And the same thing you were saying about the respect. I mean, there's lots of people that watched documentaries. You can buy likes and buy fake profiles and buy all. I mean, you could. So you start the question, like, is half the stuff you're seeing on there even, and you wonder with these Kickstarters, like, how many people come in and pledge under different names with same guy. I mean, you don't, because I have no idea if Kickstarter, like, if you enter in the same credit card under like 5 different names, does Kickstarter track that?
Supposedly they have some systems in place to prevent that, because there was somebody, and I can't remember who it was, that was gaming it. Somehow they figured out a way to game the whole system. Supposedly they have stuff, but I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. People are smart, and they're very, they will find ways to get around stuff, so there's no telling,
Yeah. I mean, I recently started a new job, and I asked this guy, and he was giving me the skinny about people at the job and all stuff. And I just asked him, because from my experience, whenever you get hired for a job, there's actually 2 jobs you're supposed to do. There's the job that they say you're supposed to do, and then there's the job that you're really supposed to do. And the job that they say you're supposed to do is an 8-hour job, and you're supposed to follow X, Y, and Z regulations and do this. But when you don't produce the work that they want, then you're supposed to figure out the job you're really supposed to do, whether that's cutting this corner or staying 12 hours later or whatever, right? And I think that's kind of success, quote unquote, is a big part of that in any field.
So, I used to work a salary job, and it was always just my boss would come in, late at the end of the day because he would work from home and then give us a bunch of, changes, do this, and that, and just expected me to stay. It's like, but once at 5 o'clock, you're not paying me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm technically not making any money. And he always had this like, but we're family. And I'm like, I got my family, dude. Sorry, I'm going home to see him right now. But I had to train him almost in a way that, when it hits 5 o'clock, unless there's some dire emergency, I'm going home, man. I've been here all day. But again, like that job, but that's what he secretly, like with a family, it's like, you're supposed to come in from 9 to 5, like you're saying, but your real job is to stay here as long as you can, regardless of whether you're paid or not. Yeah. Because you owe loyalty to the company. And I'm like, that's
the trigger word. Whenever a boss or whenever you're interviewed for something and says like work a family here, what they mean is you're going to overwork me until I resent you, like my aunt at Thanksgiving.
Exactly. So if we're family, and all families dysfunctional, so
I've always when I hear that, I'm pretty skeptical too, because like if we're family, it's kind of hard to fire family,
But I had a boss.
At some point, you let them back in, but here we fire this person and we never see or hear from them again.
The excommunicator. Right? I had a boss that people were leaving the company in video games, as they often do when they get burnt out. And he did the morning meeting. Hey, we're family. We're here for you. My door's open to you. And I knew in 45 minutes he would forget he said it. So as soon as he finished giving this long speech and he walked in his office, I followed him in his office and I said, well, you were just saying we're family, right? He goes, yeah. You said we could talk to you about anything. He goes, yeah. I go, I need a raise.
Look, man.
You kind of gave it to me. Yeah, I kind of had to. At that point, so.
Yeah, no. So when you can damage them like that, no. But definitely something. The advice that I picked up from American canon writer Sinclair Lewis, when I recommend to everyone else, take up a job in finance for your day job, because your job as written is 9 to 5, federal holidays off. Do reports and regulations. Your real job is 3 hours of filing those reports and 5 hours of doing kind of whatever and generating no value for the economy, but you get paid a bit of money for it. So you get a lot of writing time if you work in finance.
I think we got to start a website called The Real Job, where just everybody from every career is like a blog. They put what the real job is in each actual field that you're supposed to work in. That would be amazing.
Well, that was kind of true in that movie Office Space, and he said like, he's like, I think I really only do 15 minutes of real work a week or something like that. I'm like, that's probably true in most jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that whole like 9 to 5 thing is just a facade that people are busy, but there's so many jobs I'd go there and just be like, all the work's done. I don't know what to do.
Yep.
And it's like, we can't do anything for yourself. I'm like, well, okay, I'll stare at the ceiling. We can't do that. And it's like, I've had boss like tell me, find out. I worked at a copy center, and I would just sit on the counter. He's like, we're not paying you for leaning. I'm like, well, there's no customers or whatever. Well, so then you need to clean. And I think I must have cleaned that place like top and bottom over and over, because there's nothing to do.
And even though they paid you to clean, you know what happened when he closed his door at night? An hour later, the cleaning crew came in and actually scrubbed down the place.
And actually scrubbed and cleaned it.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. The thing is, like, the thing you want to tell them is like, we didn't, pay you to stand around. I'm like, yes, you did. You paid me to stand around in case somebody comes up and wants help.
Yeah.
That was what you did. Well, that's not what we did. I'm like, you did.
Yeah.
And so I'm standing around. The fact that I have to stand on my feet half the time, it's like,
The first job I ever worked was in screen printing, and that's it was a small shop. Everybody there knew how to do everybody else's job except for mine. So if I was done with mine, I had to go and do their job with them. And that's one thing I learned early on, that was real big around there. And I've actually, done really well with that mentality is, if things aren't really busy, grab a broom. do something. At least look like you're doing something, or like George said on Seinfeld, just walk around like you're perplexed all the time. People think
Yeah.
you're busy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's so true. Oh man, you just always, that
yeah.
means you're really busy if you're always perplexed all the time.
Yeah, there's definitely something that's happened a couple times where one of us will me and my coworkers will finish like whatever file we're working on or whatever, and we have like nothing else scheduled for like the rest of the week or whatever. So we'll grab up some papers and walk to the other office, sit down, like, so the new Avengers event.
Yeah.
As long as you have the physicality, right?
Yeah.
Most
It's
of the
action
time,
hands.
yeah, I would just draw pictures or whatever at my last job because I was an illustrator. I mean, there was not much to clean. I hated being bored at work. I'd rather do something. Being bored at work when you're watching the clock, it's torture.
That's the worst. That is rough.
Yeah.
It's like you're like, is this clock even working?
I knew a guy that used to print out web pages, and then he would put it in the manila folder, like in one of my insurance jobs, and he would just like read these articles, of MSNBC.
Oh my,
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Read in the dossier.
There's everybody knows the whole killing time at work because I mean
even the office manager's into it, even if they say they aren't. My office manager is very chill, so they'll come out and start shooting the
well, I'll say this place
the PC appropriate or PG appropriate thing for shooting shooting the chaff. They'll come and start doing that, or everyone is also into boxing in their office for whatever reason.
Inside the office, like they're into boxing, or they're into boxing inside the office.
Yes.
I like this place. This sounds interesting.
Yeah. So our manager's been a boxer for like several years, and so she's super into it, and like we'll be demoing what we're practicing or whatever, like inside the office.
Nice.
Or like what new drills we picked up, we demo that, or like share Instagram reels of what we're doing.
That's awesome. That's cool.
This job I'm working with now, which I say now, but it's been 14 years. I don't know how that happened, but it did. I work on the computer, and we have everything time stamped. And so they know exactly how long you work on something.
Wow.
And they also have our computers monitored to where if you're away from your computer, they can see after a few minutes. Like, so you have to be really careful. And me, I'm a very, I've always prided myself on this. I'm not the fastest. I am not the smartest, but I can be very likable, and that's one thing that's really gotten me through at a lot of my jobs. But I often am a little scared in this. I try to always stay busy and everything because you know how it goes at work. If somebody gets to where they don't like you anymore, or you fall out of favor. Which I'm not a butt kisser, but at the same time, I'm equally, friendly to everybody. But I'm just wondering, because if they wanted to, they could go back through all of my timestamps and on my artwork and stuff, and they could see, hey, this guy's messing around. We even have a scoreboard.
Huh.
Like every time we get a design done, it goes up on the scoreboard. Every time we get a change done, it goes on the scoreboard, and all those designs have timestamps on them, so you don't want to be fooling around too much. But really, I have to say though, as big a company as this is, there's more than enough stuff. Sometimes I can't even stay on top of it all. So I mean, I don't really have that big of a problem staying busy. Some might in some positions, but not mine.
Well, I was the main artist at my this job I worked at, and he would always, I see you actually looking out the window sometimes and stuff, and I can tell him like, yeah, because I'm thinking. He's like, well, you're not looking at the screen. I'm like, do you know how anti-productive it is to be creative and look at a computer screen? I would go out, I would tell him like, look, I'm going to go for a walk, and I would go for a walk around Portland, and I would come back with like 4 ideas. Yeah, like that. getting away from your screen, looking outside, thinking. But they go like, you need to be looking at your computer screen. I'm like, that you're actually going to get less work from me if you force me to do that.
Yeah.
Let me do my own thing. And he started figuring it out. I was like, okay.
Well, I
good.
tell you, there was a time during this 14 years that I was going to leave because we had a guy over us who was supposedly an artist, but he was not an artist, and
he was
you
an
know,
artiste.
this guy that is in charge now. I probably don't need to be talking a lot about this, but anyway, he was a friend of mine, and he was a fellow artist who ended up getting the position when the other guy moved, and he understands and allows, a little bit, a few extra minutes here and there, especially when you're working on something that really requires your creativity.
Yep.
Right.
Because we are constantly, especially when it comes to brochure stuff, new stuff, you are constantly like on the, trying to come up with something new and fresh because it's like we're printing t-shirts and caps and all these things. And we've done millions of different designs. And a lot of these schools have been using this place for years.
Right.
So they're aware of all your tricks. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, this looks just like the shirt from blah, 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 So I remember there's one in particular, there's a school that has a gaming club. And I was trying to do the production thing and try to hurry, fudging a little bit here and there. They wanted a design with a dragon on it. So I just Google and start drawing a dragon from some other, IP or whatever. And they're like, they caught me. They were like, no, this is the dragon from such and such. And they knew exactly where it came from.
Wow.
That was about 8, and then I had to go back and redo everything and actually from the ground up actually creatively come up with a dragon.
That's hard to do.
And yeah, it's especially with a dragon, with scales and all that stuff. They were very particular, but let me tell you, that happened 10 years ago, and every year they ask for me. Every year they say, we got to get your artist to work on our dragon this year. It's going to be a green D&D dragon, or it's going to be a, this Pathfinder dragon from this, storyline or whatever.
Right.
And anyway, so it's pretty interesting. But he allows the guy that's in there now, and it's been there for several years now. He, man, I was so close to leaving. I was just fed up with it.
Well, because I would sit there and try to explain to my boss, like, you can't dictate innovation and creativity. It's not like something automatically just happens. You have to have downtime. You have to have things to ponder, things to look at, because you don't know where you're going to get your ideas from. Yeah. And he's always like, look at examples online. And I'm like, yeah, that only works to get the brain functioning, but I have to actually split my focus from that and do other things. And he started finally getting it. And that's my biggest frustration. Sometimes being an artist, people like, well, we can dictate innovation. We can just dictate. And I'm like, no, you really can't. That's not how creativity works. I mean, people like, well, where do your ideas come from? I'm like, well, usually when I'm doing something stupid or something, something will hit.
Brandon Sanderson calls them essentially like brain breaks or like brain breathers. I can't remember the actual like psychological.
I call them carpet angels. You get on your carpet and you look up at the ceiling and you just
I mean, honestly, but there's something we went over when I went through my program at school. But studies show that you're more likely to create or be able to continue an idea if your brain is experiencing a surplus of serotonin and dopamine. However, the act of creating something, enjoying something, even though if it is something you enjoy, does not actively create those chemicals or the triggers to produce those chemicals. Whereas a lot of either physical activity or unrelated activity does. So doing something stupid or going down your carpet and making angels, it is going to cause your brain to trigger that response, which will then fire your creative drive again.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
You have to be inspired right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sure Crossroads
really,
is-
the first place I worked for, where I told y'all it was a small shop, they used to really get on to me about, man, why you always drawing monsters? And I was just drawing comic book stuff.
Yeah.
Why are you always drawing monsters and stuff that's just stupid? and, like, and then
You keep
one
telling
day,
me
probably
pictures
about
of your wife.
about 5 years, good one. About 5 years after I'd been there, the boss, after so many years of me working for him, putting up with his stuff, he came to me. He said, I used to be really hard on you about all the stuff you like to draw, and it's not the kind of stuff I like. It's not the kind of stuff I care for. I don't. And I remember him saying, I don't really know who cares for it, but anyway, he said, that's one of the things that I missed, is that that was one of the things that made you good at what you do, is because doing all the stuff you like to do, it made you better at doing the stuff I wanted you to do. So,
Yeah.
and I was so glad to hear that. Probably one of the only things I could go back to with that guy, that, he once paid me when I wasn't working for him, so I wouldn't work for anybody else in town.
nice.
And
That's a good
it was
deal.
easy to accept the money for a little while, because I wasn't wanting to work for anybody else in town, because it's a town of like 12,000 people,
Notwithstanding.
yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, he
I'm
was
sure-
a real shrewd business person.
Oh, I've had art teachers and stuff. You draw stuff that's getting crap for drawing comic book stuff. Like, yeah, look how much money people are making off that crap now, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure Curse Spray does the same thing, but there have been plenty of days where I'll be stuck on a panel or something, so I'll go out to my gym and just like put in several rounds in my heavy bag. And being a kickboxer, it is one of the loudest contact sports. Most people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm plotting.
I'm plotting. Yeah. I'm working. I'm doing things. Strangely enough, that's why, like I've talked about, why I sometimes play video games and draw, because watching a movie, I'm still thinking about the drawing, right? So
Yeah.
even if I stop drawing and look at the movie, it's still percolating in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Video games are interactive, so it focuses my attention, especially if it's a Neo and I'm getting my butt kicked all the time. But it focuses my attention, so when I actually take a break and go back to my drawing, I actually see it with fresh eyes. And I've caught so many mistakes and so many little things that I haven't seen, because I'm like, oh, that head's too big, or this hand's, this, or it's not working, and because it breaks my concentration. And it's
With
actually
me, it depends on the stage that I'm in. Like in the drawing, like if I'm in the layout phase, man, I don't watch nothing, because that is the hardest for me, is the layouts. Is figuring out, because there's so many variables that go into the layout. You're trying to make everything eye catching, and you're trying to move people's eyes, and you're trying to get the right angles inside of the panels, and that's just really challenging for me. So once I hit like something that's mechanical, like what I'm doing right now, the inking, I could watch something and I'm talking. This is all mechanical. Yes, I'm putting a few details in here that you don't see, that's in my rough, pencils, but this is all mechanical. So I could watch something, I could talk, I could do other stuff, but it really depends on the stage I'm at, whether I can watch something or listen to something.
Yeah, that's pretty much if I'm going over my pencils again, and because I go over my pencils twice, or inking or whatever, that's all mechanical. Design wise, I'm usually looking at books or whatever. I'm trying to visualize the story. I'm usually pretty simple with my storytelling. I usually don't change the camera up too much unless it's for a dramatic effect. I've found it depends on the story too. Goblins was a very personal story, so I didn't want to do a lot of it wasn't supposed to be superhero, so I consciously took that out of that story. My next story, I think, is going to be more action oriented, so I want to practice more with extreme close-ups and stuff like that nature. I do think sometimes people, because I find it weird sometimes in comics that people will take they'll draw like a drama, and they'll use superhero type action scenes and cameras and perspectives, and it's like, yeah, it's not really working. You need to kind of, I do think your layout can reflect the kind of story you're telling. a little bit. So I know some people like, yeah, but that's the language of comics. Yeah, for each individual genre too. I don't think the same superheroes work for everything. So I think superhero stuff can work for like what he's doing with the fantasy stuff.
Mhm.
Swords and knights and action. But I used to be Strangers in Paradise, and I remember looking at that, and a lot of his stuff is very cartoon strip. There's not a lot of extremes, and he would use extreme angles and stuff for specific scenes to draw that out. And I'm like, oh, that's really effective. Bone did the same thing. A lot of Bone is your basic sort of eye level, almost all of it, and then he would use extreme things for extreme scenes. He would save that for when it mattered. I thought that's an interesting idea. I like that.
We are running over time, and I have
Oh, yeah, we are.
streamed some Destiny. So we didn't get to. Well, first I want to mention this. I was on purpose, but my
The Frog Brothers.
Frog Brothers. Wow, I forgot the name of the movie already.
Lost Boys.
Lost Boys.
Lost Boys. Yeah.
Speaking a non-traditional way of integrating comics into movies, where it is a movie based on the Dracula comic world, taking nothing from the Dracula comic.
Yeah,
But that is the main point of reference for all of the like points of action, and like here's how I plan how to beat the vampires is all taken from a comic book.
Yeah.
But we didn't get to talk about too much. But video games and comics, that intersection. Obviously, there's a lot with like the Arkham games and
Spider-Man,
Marvel Avengers is a big one recently. So if anyone has any favorites or standouts, I'll quickly mention their draw together or anything like that.
I like the Arkham. Yeah, I like the Spider. I think I like the Spider-Man games the most, just because, like I said, I was never a huge fan of Spider-Man growing up. He was okay, but seeing him in motion, seeing what he can do, I understood what was supposed to be happening in my head. Like when you see him swinging through the city and get the control, I'm like, oh, that's super fun, swinging around. To see him in the movies, I think he's a character that actually serves better with more of a kinetic emotion than most superheroes, because he's moving all the time. That's his power. So the games are fun. Those are probably my favorite as far as superhero games, would be the Spider-Man ones. So, and it's very close. I don't know. Batman is close. I don't know either or. I just like swinging around the city in the Batman.
This is a weird throwback. Did I ever play the Radioactive Spider-Man game on the NES?
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, that was a good time.
Oh yeah, I have played that. Yeah, I played that years ago. That was one of my favorite games. That and the Batman. Those were I picked up all those. That was the first time. It was a side-scrolling Batman game where you could jump onto walls, and kind of like you do in Mario now, you grab onto the wall and you.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Had never been done before, that game, or that I know of. Oh, Ninja Gaiden did it. Never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I like definitely the Spider-Man games. I think are amazing. I can't wait to see what they do with Insomniac does with Wolverine, because they got that Wolverine game coming out.
I'm really curious to see if they're gonna. Did you guys ever play the old Wolverine or based off a movie?
Gosh,
there was actually a really good one that was based off a Wolverine movie that was different. That was probably the best Wolverine game out there. And I think it's just called the Wolverine.
Is this called Wolverine? Because it was after X-Men Origins, Wolverine came out, and it had nothing to do with. The reason it's so good is because they didn't see the movie before they made the game. This knew they needed to do a Wolverine origin story. So like, oh, if it's during his time at Weapon X, fantastic.
Yeah, because it was just. I mean, it was bloody as get out. And
oh, go ahead.
I think that was kind of too, and they had this pouncing thing where you could pounce on people, like jump from afar and stab it. So, yeah. If
My
it's anything,
favorite.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Finish your thought.
No, I was just saying that I'd be curious to see what Insomniac does if they approach that. I'm curious to see if it's open world.
Yeah.
That's the thing I'm really curious about.
That's gonna be semi-open world. So
we'll
see.
Get the Wolverine on his chopper.
Yeah. Definitely.
One of my all-time favorite superhero games was Marvel Ultimate Alliance.
Oh yeah,
the first one. The second one was okay. I played the new one. That thing is just way too convoluted for me.
Sure.
Wasn't it like the one just for the Switch? Wasn't that there were one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it forced me to go and buy a Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and you know how much they wanted for that game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness! To try to go and get a throwback game like that is way expensive.
Yeah,
remember taking the quizzes in there and always acing them. I
Yeah.
was like, you guys need to challenge me.
Yeah.
I was too much of a nerd for that game. Like I knew all that
love
stuff.
the movies, and
Yeah.
you know, it was at a time when we didn't have an Avengers movie,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and the clips, man, were just so good. I'd never seen my favorite character, Doctor Doom, the way I, you know, had seen him in that game, and to see Captain America throw his shield and do all the stuff that he was doing,
Yeah.
you didn't see that. You know, all we had was that those crappy couple movies they made of him, and
Yeah.
to see that come to life, it was just really good.
Yeah. The my actual go-to favorite is it's dead now, but Marvel Heroes Omega, which they can because Marvel Avengers was supposed to replace it, and Marvel Avengers might be dead.
I
already.
think that thing was very close. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the system is there, but there wasn't enough support, which is unfortunate for a company as big as Square Enix. But I think they put it out and then shoved all the resources into Endwalker. Endwalker's great, but Avengers suffered.
What you're seeing now on the screen is the power of the internet to shorten inking times considerably.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
The power of the program.
yeah, and this is something we'll get into later. Is modern style technique working versus traditional, where some people say like I only like traditional ink pages because it has that feel to it, but then you might have the artist who's like, yes, but also I can do this in 1/5 the time as a traditional page and maintain my sanity.
Yeah.
I wear too many hats, dude. I'm a father.
Mhm.
I work a day job. My hat's off to those who have said I'm only going to do traditional, and that's great. You know, if you can do it, that's fine. But if you have my life, you're digital.
Yeah, we call those people the Amish, just in case.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
I must be Amish because I work primarily traditional. I color in the computer, but I ink and draw traditionally, and I'm still amazed when I beat people who work because I still like people who draw like computer wise. I'm like, you're gonna be clocking me, and I'm beating them, and I'm like, okay, dude, you're not proving your point at all with this digital stuff if I'm clocking you with traditional. So you got to step up your game a little.
Well, the problem is they're the ones who are just staring at their computer screen waiting for inspiration to come to them rather than being yeah.
Well, another thing for me is this. I work in production commercial environments, and there is a point where speed at some point has to be factored in. You can't just stay on one piece too long. Like I say, we have a scoreboard, and there's people beside you doing what you're doing, and they're like throwing numbers up there.
Yeah.
And you got to keep up a little bit, or else they're gonna be like, "Hey, man, I see you only got 3 designs done today." And then this guy over here's got 49. It happens.
Oh yeah. No, I know. When I used to
Mhm.
do storyboarding, I would trace cars and stuff. Because storyboarding, who cares? No one's going to see that besides the editor. So I never cared about that. But I remember getting into storyboard. I was doing traditional pencil storyboards, and I did digital. And he's like, "This will speed you up," and I didn't notice a huge speed up with me.
No.
But then again, I don't know. Maybe I was just.
Well, I tell you, with me, it took a while. It's like when I first got a Wacom tablet. And I'm talking about not the kind that you draw directly on the screen. I'm talking about the one before. Man, it was so foreign to me drawing down here and drawing and looking up there, and I just decided I'm not doing another traditional thing until I get this. And it took about 3 months before I felt really comfortable with it enough to where a line was a line that I was, looking for. But I know we have to end our show, right?
We do. And I'm just going to end by saying that I'm going to become the world's first traditional only writer and do all my comic panels by typewriter. Yeah. I'm sure.
What a great idea.
Yeah,
that cover was done on a typewriter.
This cover's done on a typewriter. That's enough. Yeah. But
very clever, Mr. Tim.
Next month we do have Wolf Hunter coming out, so be on the lookout for that. We do also have Daytona Beach coming up in September, I know I will be there. Curtis, you're also going to be there, correct?
No, I won't be able to make it out there, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
At which one?
At Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
I might be able to. I'm still working on that because I had to cancel last year because of the COVID. But the COVID seems to have calmed down enough that I think I'm gonna give it a shot.
Nice.
Yeah. I know. All right, well, I'll be there. So 6 a.m. I'll be running footwork and striking circuits in the hotel
Nice.
gym.
Live stream. There's a live stream right there.
Exactly.
Well, that's when the con party is supposed to be, I thought. I'm not coming now. We're just going to the gym.
All right. You can follow our socials down there. And we also have, when this crawl ends, there's me. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, where I'm going to be sharing my Destiny stream here in a second. And I also have, I can do this over here and just cover Curtis's face entirely.
Trying to climb up.
Yeah, there you go.
Not the special guest.
There you go.
There you go. And you can follow Chris Vegeta at showgoes.com and tigergreen.net.
Yep.
You can follow this channel. We'll be back on next Tuesday for another show on Tuesday, as well as 8 p.m. Eastern for Wednesday Night Wham, and 8 p.m. Eastern on Sunday for Silver Sunday. And I think Curtis is on one or two of those shows.
Yes, Silver Sunday. I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we have been your Tuesday crew. I'm going to clear these, and we're going to run our end of show bumper type thing, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
And until then, remember to
make my
minds
wide. Hey,
Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang!
Hey, I'm Alex Saviuk, and I just want to let you know, make mine civilized.